This is Profound Conversations, and we are with Deborah Jackson Taffa, the author of Whiskey Tender, a person who has taken an opportunity to tell the indigenous population's narrative from her perspective, her experience, and give it some agency so that we can also have agency to know how to speak for ourselves as a people. This narrative of Whiskey Tender, of a person who has encountered a society that sought to erase her identity and the identity of those that look like her, but she said, I will speak for those who could not speak for themselves. Deborah Jackson Taffa, thank you for being here, part of part two of Profound Conversations.
It is my great honor. I'm happy to be here.
So we want to delve into this. After having been informed by a European worldview that begins to speak to the insignificance of the indigenous population, whether it is Navajo, Pueblo, whether it is Choctaw, Cherokee, whether it is Seminole, all over, we have this narrative that speaks to the insignificance of a population, or the ignorance, or the savagery of a population. We have that happening, and you were educated in a school system that told you a little about who you were, but told you about who you were not more than who you were. Mm-hmm. You understand that has some negative implications on health, psychological well-being, and longevity. So speak to that. What do you see in the community?
I can say what I see for myself is that all children are put upon by those, by the slander, the way that they slander us as Indigenous people, the things that they say about our population. I had the good fortune of having a father who I could see, I could observe in my daily life, that he worked 3 jobs. He worked he was a very humble man, but he went out and he welded, he changed brakes, he hauled trash, he did whatever he had to do, to make sure that we were fed. There was a sort of a pride in him in saying, and so some of the stereotypes of Indigenous men are that they are down and out, they can't better their own circumstances. I never saw that with my father. So I had an internal strength that allowed me to kind of look at the men in my family that I knew, the women I knew, the people who I admired who were Indigenous, and say, there is something off here. The way that they are describing my people is not what I observe in my daily life. That took time, though. It is persistent. The propaganda is everywhere. And the illnesses emerge, I feel like, in 3 different ways. Spiritually, when we become very depressed, it's a mental health factor that leads to suicidal ideation, alcoholism. I was hospitalized when I was in high school because I lived in this little town called Farmington, New Mexico, that was made famous in the 1970s. Newspapers were calling it the Selma, Alabama of the Southwest, because there were so many hate crimes being committed against Navajo people. But it also emerges a lot in Native American communities, this illness, as diabetes, which I saw that my mother had, like an addiction to sugar. She just could not taste the sweetness of life. She was so depressed. She just ate a lot of sugar. It made her, and I knew that I didn't want to go that route. And then there are environmental illnesses in New Mexico. My grandma Esther was at Laguna Pueblo when they tested the atomic bomb, and she saw it, and there was like gray ash falling out of the sky. And the US government did not warn anyone in the region that they should avoid drinking water out of their cisterns and wells, that they should be careful. And she died of a very rare form of sinus cancer when I was a child. And so the illnesses are pervasive. They are physical, environmental, mental. They are everywhere. And, faith, I think that I've always had a very deep faith. The ability to think independently and observe for myself beyond what they were teaching me in school. And then the role of medicine people in my community grew me past that sort of danger zone period in my teens and early 20s, as well as did travel. I traveled to West Africa, and I traveled to Indonesia. I traveled in a lot of countries in my 20s, and slowly but surely I began to realize that I had more in solidarity with the world than I knew. In the United States, I felt like a minority. Once I started to travel, I realized that I was one of many colonized individuals. We are a majority. We are a force. We are a strength. And I started to take pride in it, and I refused to feel shame. And that was when I began to heal.
You mentioned so much about the healing process, right? You mentioned the medicine person. You mentioned the idea of a healer in your community. And then you mentioned travel, right? Coming and going is how a bird builds its nest is an Ashanti proverb.
Mm,
And so you talk about that as being a healing aspect of things. And I am moved by the discourse around being ashamed of who you are because of what you're taught. Uh,
mhm.
Being embarrassed, not really being fulfilled. Also having Farmington, having the experiences of trauma, racial trauma, terrorizing of the psyche of a population. I think that is so important. And I love what you said about the psycho-spiritual disruption, right? So the spiritual attack that then changes things. Also, you mentioned the physical, the adjustment, right? Psychological adjustment to that. We know that when the allostatic load increases, it then facilitates the body not being able to uh, um, get rid of adrenaline or noradrenaline, which
Mhm.
also leads to high cortisol
Yeah.
within the bloodstream, which leads to coronary heart disease. So you're saying that the dynamics of being oppressed and being terrorized daily cause ill health to the body, and so you see a high occurrence of diabetes. You see a high occurrence, of course, of coronary heart disease and other things. But then you mentioned the environmental racism, right?
Mhm.
Of having a population be subjected to environs that can kill them and destroy them. And that's something that continues to happen around the world, where there are populations that have been despised by a so-called majority, but you say that they're really not the majority; they're the minority, and that you have more in
Mhm.
common with the world than not. I think that's important to note, that the ill that takes place in the population, the alcoholism, the infant mortality rate, the early deaths, is not always because of their poor health choices,
No.
but it's because of the influence of terroristic actions against that population.
Mhm.
But you also
Yeah.
speak to how you break past that, which is
Yeah.
you said that.
So,
Go ahead, speak about that because that's
oh,
important.
I was just going to say that I think in many ways anger served me in my youth. I think that I've seen people in my family that have sort of a fatalistic acceptance of the injustices and the feeling that they're not sure what they can do about it. And it's, you have so much internal pressure as an oppressed person in this country, and it's just resurging now. We're seeing that it's so hard to put to rest, to learn to love one another and to have empathy and compassion for each other should not be as difficult as it is. From Obama, there's been this incredible backlash. From the happiest point of my adulthood, seeing him elected, we have swung completely back in the opposite direction. And I see men like my father. He's 83 years old. He took his first community college class at the age of 81. He's constantly trying to learn, he's trying to grow. And I keep, to see him sitting in front of the television set, watching what's happening to the United States now is crushing. So I don't mean to imply that the pressures ever go away. I'm ever mindful that I live with that high cortisol, that it's a part of my life. And it could be the vision and the dream is probably not going to be arrived at in my lifetime. What I can do is inspire the next generation to pick up where I leave off when I die. And to do that, I must enable them to see themselves in the mirror, to see the good that has come
Mm,
from our communities, to see how our ancestors, our grandparents, and our great grandparents fought on our behalf legally, in protest, in many different forms. They tried to make the world better for us, and to say, the baton will be passed to you. And I know it's a terrible thing to pick up, but there's no other choice. And so when I think about why I wrote this book or how I survived, it's a coupling of righteous anger, internal pressure, and knowing that I could not bottle that up inside of myself because it will eat away at your soul. you have to find a way to serve your local community. And that might be very small in the beginning. It could just be your family and your relatives. It could grow to your church if you belong to a church, or to your school if you belong to a school. And if you do it well, your community that you influence will naturally get bigger until you're on podcasts and you're talking to people in, in larger populations, and doing what you do. But you would do it no matter how small that influence, or no matter how big. In the Pueblo language, there's a word. It is woitziki. It means, for life's sake we do this. I didn't write a
Mm.
book to create a career. I wrote a book as a vocation. I wrote a book because it's my passion to find a way to make sure that justice, not only for people but for the planet, to be upheld. It is horrific. It is horrific, the idea of letting the oppressor continue forward and win with the destruction of the earth and the destruction of children and innocent
Mm.
people. I just, it means so much to me to kind of be able to tell my story. And when I run into people who have read the book, young Dene girls, young Navajo girls, young people from all different walks of life, for them to tell me, your book spoke to me and it somehow is helping me. It's helping shine a light in my soul in this dark period. Then I look back and I think of Bells Hooks and Leslie Marmon Silko and Maya Angelou. And I think I have stepped into a role where I'm able to do some, in small measure, what they have done. And it feeds me even as I'm exhausted from the
You
fight.
know, you actually, I learned this when I spent time with indigenous populations in California when I taught in San Francisco State University, and also in when I was in Oklahoma and
Mhm.
Nebraska, about medicine, right? And you are good medicine, and whiskey tender is good medicine. It's medicine that facilitates the healing of the soul. You said that this idea of your anger serves you. And I say that it's okay to be mad. Mad for
Mhm.
me stands for make a difference. If we
Yes.
came out of the womb and we were not upset with the fact that the light was bright and the air was cold, we wouldn't have cried. And if we didn't cry, somebody would make us cry. That means we had our first breath of inspiration. So the events inspired you, right, to
Mhm.
move forward. You mentioned that the cholesterol is still a part of you, the high cholesterol, the cortisol levels
Mhm.
are high. And we have to be clear about the idea of what I call persistent enslavement systemic trauma. It's not something that just goes away. It's not a post phenomenon. It's ongoing. But inside of that, you say that it allows you to be able to move into a greater sense of agency, a purpose, to be able to be a voice, not only for the voiceless, but those who have yet to speak.
Yes.
And you mentioned altruism, the idea of being involved. We know that longevity is enhanced among those who engage in activities of altruism, where they actually go out and they do something for someone else, because we can often roam free in our own heads with no adult supervision. That's according to Jan Van Zant. But when we engage in the process of moving and doing, we can actually be.
Mhm.
And that being allows us to be able to become. And so it's important to note that as we move beyond our condition, there are things that we can do. And your thing has been, and it is, speaking,
Yes.
telling your story, your truth. And
Mhm.
your truth and your story is my truth and story. I can see myself in the narrative, and others can see themselves. And so, again, I want to thank you. Thank you for this good medicine. I thank you for sharing. Anything you want to close out with, Profound Conversations, please close us out with something that you want us to do, think about, because you are just a prophetic person that I just enjoy talking to, and we just got to continue. But anyway, Deborah Jackson, talk to us. Close us out with
I
something.
Yeah, I would say that, knowing that my life is short and that I won't live forever and that I may not see the dream fulfilled in my lifetime, it's highly unlikely, is a good thing to know, and it spurs you to action. When I think about the stress that life has served up to me, and even the stress of traveling around the country to speak with people, I remind myself that I won't be here forever, and I want to die knowing that I've done all that I could for my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren and indigenous futures. And it's important to remember that we are becoming, to not think that we have hit a wall or that things won't swing back our way. Identity is a verb. We are verbs, we are becoming. And so I want to underscore that you said that, and to offer everyone who's watching or listening hope. Do not give up on hope. Joy is a form of resistance. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mwada.
Thank you. Profound conversations. This is it. Uh, this is it. This is it. That's all I say. That was powerful. Thank you so much. Continue to be good medicine. Continue to serve and elevate us in consciousness so that we can be better, do better, and live better. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mwada.
Thank you.